Books, books. I like books. I'm gonna read them all.
Hi readers, Chris here. Welcome to my channel where I review fantasy, Stephen King, all sorts of books, and tonight I'm going to be talking about two books, and that is The Twisted Ones by Kingfisher and Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. I feel like I've already talked about these books a lot, so I'm going to try to keep these reviews short and sweet. Chapter times will be in the description if you'd rather hear about one over the other. Before I jump in, I will just say that both of these books were recommended by my fellow readers, by you. Emily Wilde was recommended by Nicole over at Nicole's Bookish Nook, and The Twisted Ones was recommended by Bad over at Bad is Red. And I know I've said this a million times, but I'm going to say it again. Thank you so much to both of you for recommending such wonderful books. So let's start with Emily Wilde first. I had already heard so many good things about Emily Wilde before Nicole recommended it to me, so I was super excited when I got this recommendation. So this is a fantasy book. I think it's considered an adult fantasy, but it's not adult in there's no language or sex or violence. I think it's just a really mature story. So that's why I think it's considered more on the adult side as opposed to YA. So the main character of this story is this young student named Emily Wilde. She's a professor, but she's also a student too, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And she is basically working on this thesis. She's trying to get published. She's trying to be this really prominent person in her profession. So therefore, she is trying to put together this encyclopedia of fairies. So yes, there are fairies in this world. Everyone knows that there are fairies, but there are so many different types of fairies, so many different kinds, and there's no one location where all information about fairies are stored. So she's yes, this is a space that I can make my mark in. I can create the world's first encyclopedia of fairies, and it'll be this comprehensive look at the fairy, at their lore, everything about them, and this is gonna make me famous in my field. So in order to accomplish that, she goes to this remote village to try and learn about the fairies there because she has some information missing that she's trying to find out. Once she gets to this village, first of all, because this village is kind of isolated and small, she is very much seen as an outsider. So she really isn't welcomed by the village people. So she really is kind of on her own. And in this world, basically, very basic, you can kind of categorize the fairies into two different categories. There's the more simple fae, which are woodland sprites, and they're kind of small and they're mischievous and yada yada yada. But then you also have what is known as the high fae. So these are the fairy kings and queens, and they can be more maniacal, shall we say. They can switch babies with their own. They do changelings. They can possess people. They can curse people. They're super powerful. So she's trying to find out which kind of fairies are maybe influencing some of the happenings in town. So along this quest, while she's trying to accomplish this, there's also a fellow professor that shows up that she's not happy to see, and that is Wendell. And Wendell is basically more famous than her. He is more prestigious than her. He's more published than her. So she very much has this oh, I want to beat him academically, but she's also kind of drawn to him, and she doesn't really know why he's shown up, why he's always where she is, why he's always getting involved in what she's doing. And I don't want to give anything away, but let's just say that Wendell is a very interesting character. And my personal favorite character of this story is Shadow. Emily has this dog named Shadow, and I can't say much about him without giving anything away. But let's just say if you are an animal lover, if you like dogs, Shadow is a super cool character. So what I really like about Emily as a character is like she very much is a student and she very much like quests for knowledge. Even though she is like super smart, she's super accomplished in her field, she has all these degrees and accreditation, she's still always trying to learn more. As much as she does know and as smart as she knows that she does not know everything and she is always seeking to learn more. I think that is an incredible like characteristic to have. And I feel like that's something anyone can learn from. So I feel like she's very much one of those characters that like someone can aspire to be. Like she's not afraid to ask help, even though she doesn't always want to. She's super smart. She can get herself out of situations. But again, at the end of the day, she is self-aware enough to know that she does not know everything. And I think that's really, really, really great and something we don't always see in these type of stories, especially from female characters. Another thing I really like this book, and I know Nicole has mentioned this in her reviews, is that I love the view that the book takes on fairies isn't all like rainbows and sunshine and lollipops. Like, yes, there are fairies that are small and cute and mischievous, but this book also explores like the dark side of fairies. The fact that there are fae who are not like, they're malevolent. What's the word I'm looking for? Malevolent. Is that the right word? I don't even know. But basically, like, they're not out to do good. They're out to cause, like, real harm. Like, they are dark fairies, dark fae, and I think that's really, really cool. I have read stories about dark fae before, and I think this book does a really good job of, like, exploring that side of fairy lore. So yes, I've said it once, I've said it a million times, I really like this book. I really like the characters, I really love the setting, I really love the plot. I love everything about this book. Yes, there is a romance in it, but it is very much like the B storyline. I might even go as far to say the C storyline, so therefore it didn't bother me. So if you are someone who is into fantasy, you like fairy lore, highly recommend Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. I said this in a different video, but I would be shocked if this didn't end up as one of my favorite books of 2024. So now let's jump over and talk about The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. This is the second T. Kingfisher book that I've read. It certainly will not be my last. I have said for a long time now that I want to read more horror books outside of Stephen King, because as much as I'm a Stephen King fan and I read a lot of Stephen King books, I haven't really read a lot of horror books outside of that. So when Bad recommended this to me, I had already read Nettle and Bone. I was really excited about this one. This story is about a young girl named Mouse, and her grandmother has recently passed away. She goes to her grandmother's house to, like, clear it out, basically, you know, clean it out. She finds out her grandmother was, like, a super bad hoarder. So her grandmother's house is just, like, full, floor to ceiling of a bunch of stuff. And she comes across this diary that is filled with some very disturbing writing. There is this poem, basically, that gets repeated over and over and over again that has to do with the Twisted Ones. And at first she just tries to like brush it off as like, okay, this is just like the ramblings of like an older deranged person. But then all this weird stuff starts happening. She starts seeing things in the woods because, oh yeah, of course, her grandmother's house is like out in the boondocks, like surrounded by forest. She's out there all alone. So yeah, all this weird stuff starts happening, and come to find out, like, there is more going on than meets the eye. I feel like that's really all I need to say about this one. Young girl alone in the woods. There are things in the woods that she has to come face to face with. And yeah, it's pretty creepy. This is definitely like, I feel like one of the creepiest books I have ever read. I don't really get scared reading books, or I've never gotten scared like reading a Stephen King book. But I definitely do like get the creeps, you know, when like the hair on your arm like stands up. And I got that reading this book. I feel like Kingfisher does a really good job of like really bringing to life the creepiness of the things that go bump in the night, the things that can come out of the woods in the night. Like, there is some creepy stuff in here. So if you have a low tolerance for creep, maybe you don't want to read this one. But if you're into horror and you're into creepy stuff, I would highly recommend it. So first of all, let's talk about our main character, Mouse. I mean, honestly, if I was in her situation, I would have been out of that house so fast. I would have gone and never looked back. But she has this, like, I guess curiosity thing about her where, like, she can't let things go. She needs to find out exactly what is going on. She needs to find out, like, what this means. What are the twisted ones? Like, who are they really? Where do they come from? Like, she needs to know these things. And on one hand, I can appreciate that. I am someone who likes to know things, so maybe I wouldn't run off. Maybe I'd try to stick around, but yeah, I don't know. Now, luckily, even though this house is like out in the boondocks, there are semi-nearby, there are some farms nearby, and there are some neighbors, and there are some side characters that Mouse gets to know. In particular, there is a home nearby where a few people live, and Foxy, a character I mentioned in one of my recent videos, Foxy is this woman that lives here, and she's very much like, she's an older woman who's like kind of hippie, kind of goth, yada, yada, yada. And when Mouse shows up at her doorstep to say, hey, like, I'm Mouse, I'm cleaning out my grandmother's house, I think there might be horrible things in the woods, Foxy immediately is like, hey, I'll come spend the night at the house so you don't have to be alone. Like, that's the type of person Foxy is. She sees a young girl in distress, possibly in harm's way. She doesn't ask questions. She's just like, yes, I'm there for you. I will help you. Like, I'm not going to let a young girl go through this alone. Which I think is so admirable. Like, such an admirable quality. That's why I love Foxy so much. She's like one of the best side characters I've read in a story in a long time. I just think she's so great. So Foxy and Mouse end up forming this bond through this terrible, horrible experience that they go through. But I think that it's really sweet and really cute. And just like I said in Emily Wilde, this book also features a dog. Mouse has a dog. The dog is pretty much like her only companion until she meets Foxy. Now, I will say that something upsetting with the dog kind of happens in the book, but I will say that it turns out okay in the end. It turns out okay. It's important to say that because I don't care what happens to human characters. I only care about animals. So I was really upset about what happened to Mouse's dog, but then again, like I said, it turns out okay. So there is that. So yeah, as a newbie to horror books that aren't Stephen King, I thought this one was really fun. I think it's really fun. It's super creepy. It's got great characters. It's got a creepy plot. It's got a mystery. And yeah, it's got the twisted ones. Ooh. So if you're looking for a new horror book, highly recommend this one. And if you're not into horror at all, it might be too creepy for you. So that is it for me today. So now I want to know from you, have you ever read The Twisted Ones? Have you ever read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries? Let me know if you like them as much as I did. If you didn't like them, let me know why. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments sections below. And as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more bookish stuff coming your way soon. All right, everyone, happy reading.